Hello, I'm Joey Izzo, News Director of Channel CYM, College Charleston's only student-run video news organization. Our purpose is to revive student voices on local, national, and world news. We're dedicated to being an unbiased news source reporting strictly on the facts. We hope to continue reporting to you far into the future. Up first, I'll be taking a look at the housing crisis in 2024. For many College of Charleston students, even the mention of housing brings a sense of anxiety and dread. CFC students have been dealing with a housing crisis for the past few years, with finding affordable housing becoming an increasingly hard task. In recent years, the college has continued to bring in a record-breaking number of freshmen. And as a result, housing has become much more limited and inaccessible, leading many students to seek off-campus housing. The college has also undergone new construction efforts, resulting in some student housing buildings being closed for prolonged periods of time. The available on-campus housing the college provides has also seen, in some cases, dramatic increases in pricing. Many off-campus student housing buildings have also begun to reach maximum capacity far in advance and continue to raise their rates alongside the college and greater Charleston area. All these factors have left many students feeling worried, stressed, and frustrated, with matters getting worse every coming year. Here's where the housing crisis is in 2024. First, let's take a look at the on-campus housing rates per semester at the College of Charleston from the 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025 academic years. Rates for certain housing buildings, such as private rooms and George Street apartments, saw over a $1,200 increase in just 1 year's time. The availability of housing has become so limited recently that the college has had to take alternative measures in providing housing. This includes having to rent out hotel rooms this past year to over 40 students. This year, the college has had to lease out apartments at 61 Vandy, an off-campus student housing building. This coincides with the closing and planned demolition of College Lodge earlier this year. In its place will be a new dorm building capable of fitting more students compared to the deteriorating former building. Many are in opposition to this plan, though, due to how long it could take, with no current estimated timeline of completion having been announced by the college. The school has engaged in many other renovation efforts, including the Stern Student Center, Simmons Center for the Arts, and Addlestone Library. It brings into question why the college hasn't dedicated these resources to mending the housing crisis instead of polishing existing academic facilities. To get a sense of how students feel about the crisis in 2024, I decided to interview some students walking through Cougar Mall on the topic.
Kids are trying to find spots to live here on campus and they can't. For one, financially, and two, there's just nowhere to go.
You know, it's cheaper for me to live in my apartment, which is not cheap, than to live on campus.
I go to school here just because of scholarships. It's okay, I can handle it this year, but if it goes up more, there's only so much that my current scholarships can handle. That did scare me.
These few students' thoughts echo thousands here at the College of Charleston. The housing crisis has brought about a level of uncertainty to these students that most students in different colleges don't have to deal with. There has been large student disapproval of how the college is handling housing with each passing year, but their concerns seem to have fallen on deaf ears. From drastically increased on-campus housing rates to the closing of dormitories, with the use of only short-term alternatives and unrelated construction efforts to seemingly take precedence in the college's mind, no end seems near for the housing crisis at the College of Charleston. Unfortunately, it's the students, both current and future, who have to deal with this forced and heavy burden. Up next, Neal with a commentary on birth control.
Thanks, Joey. On October 21st, 2024, the White House produced a new rule under the Affordable Care Act. It suggests that private health insurance should cover over-the-counter contraceptives, such as condoms and birth control. While contraceptives are primarily associated with pregnancy prevention, it's not the only reason why women choose to use birth control. According to a 2020 study conducted by the Kaiser Family Foundation, almost 1 in 5 women use contraceptives only for reasons unrelated to pregnancy prevention, such as managing medical conditions, relieving pain, regulating menstrual cycles, and reducing hormone fluctuations.
Birth control pills work by using synthetic hormones such as estrogen and progestin to prevent ovulation. Throughout the menstrual cycle, the uterus contracts, which causes cramping during periods and ovulation. Some women experience severe levels of pain during cramps, and the pain can be so severe that it affects their ability to complete daily tasks. These painful cramps can be a result of underlying conditions. One of them is endometriosis, a painful condition that causes tissue similar to the lining inside the uterus to grow outside the uterus. Hormonal birth control can help relieve pain caused by these cramps and underlying conditions, creating a better quality of life and relief from potentially incapacitating pain. Birth control also works to regulate periods. It creates a consistent and routine cycle that makes periods lighter. Women can experience longer periods lasting between 7 to 8 days. Birth control helps shorten the period to an average 3 to 5 days. Because birth control reduces hormone fluctuations, it can also help with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, symptoms. PCOS is another painful condition with symptoms including cysts in the ovaries and irregular or skipped periods. It also causes high levels of androgens, male hormones that cause acne and excess hair.
As the election approaches, discussion about healthcare access and contraceptive coverage have become more frequent. The White House proposal suggesting coverage for over-the-counter contraceptives emphasizes a need for affordable options. However, the use of contraceptives is usually discussed as a technique to prevent pregnancy. In reality, women use birth control for several additional reasons, such as menstrual regulation and pain relief. Some women use birth control only for these reasons, and affordable contraceptives allow women with underlying conditions to live happier and healthier lives.
Thank you, Sarah. Up next, a glimpse into international news with Henry McMillan.
Thank you, Joey. Many of you have likely heard the phrase, "the sun never sets upon the British Empire." But how much longer will this centuries-old saying hold true?
While the British Empire may have officially ended in 1997 with the return of Hong Kong to China, there continue to be many British overseas territories which exist around the globe. In 1965, one of these aforementioned territories was created when the British government split the Chagos Archipelago away from the Crown Colony Mauritius, proclaiming the now separate Chagos Islands to exist within the newly formed British Indian Ocean Territory. These islands were historically uninhabited until they were claimed by France in the second half of the 1700s. The French then began populating the islands with African slaves and Indian indentured workers who labored upon large coconut plantations. The Chagos Archipelago then remained in French control until 1814, where the island changed hands to the British Empire. With the initial colonial history of the archipelago established, we can again return to the 20th century, specifically 1967, when the British government, by request of the United States, began pressuring all residents of the Chagos Archipelago to leave. This was due to a 1966 deal signed between the US and UK, which allowed the US to construct and operate military bases along the many islands of the archipelago, with the promise that there would be uninhabited islands to do so. At first, the British government began denying Chagosians jobs while restricting food access, but when the voluntary departure of the Chagosians was not proceeding at an adequate rate, violence was instead employed. Under threat of bullets and bombs, the Chagosians were all forced to leave their homes, with the British government even ordering the eradication of all pets upon the islands. By the year 1973, the Chagosians had all been displaced to other countries, and with the area now clear of civilians, a joint US-UK military base was constructed upon the island of Diego Garcia.
With the Chagosians now scattered and denied all access to their once homes, a multi-decade international dispute began, complete with lawsuits, British promises of reparations to the Chagosians, and international outcry against the actions of the British government. Even the International Court of Justice ruled in 2019 that the UK had no sovereign rights over the Chagos Islands. All of this has culminated in an agreement reached between the UK and Mauritius in October 2024, which sees the majority of the Chagos Islands shifting to Mauritius control and promises to allow the Chagosians to resettle all islands of the archipelago other than Diego Garcia. And while this is the most significant progress seen in regards to the Chagosians returning to their original homes, many Chagosians feel disrespected as they were allowed no direct representation in the drafting of this new agreement. And as many of the inhabitants initially lived upon Diego Garcia, which will remain a joint US-UK military base for a further 99 years with the possibility for renewal, they will be unable to return to the island which they feel is their rightful home. So while it may be a step in the right direction, a future with a British sunset and justice for the Chagosians seems to be far off in the horizon. For Channel CYM, I'm World News reporter Henry McMillan.
Thank you, Henry. For our final story, I'll be discussing Hurricane Helene relief efforts and some misconceptions surrounding them. On the morning of September 27th, Hurricane Helene hit western North Carolina as a tropical storm and caused utter devastation. The National Weather Service issued a warning to the region days prior for potential catastrophic record-breaking rainfall, landslides, and flooding. This would end up being tragically accurate, with nearly the entire town of Chimney Rock being washed away, the city of Asheville becoming isolated due to destroyed roads and power services, and as of October 18th, a total of 95 deaths in North Carolina alone. Helene shockingly became the deadliest hurricane in the United States since Katrina in 2005. This unimaginable loss of life, towns, and infrastructure has brought about many questions. What went wrong with preparation? Did FEMA and the federal government actually delay in response? And what's next for rebuilding? In regards to preparation, many factors that worsen the devastation could have been mitigated years prior. Scientists have already stated that climate change factors worsen the destruction caused by Helene, boosting its rainfall by 10% and wind by 11%. With the rise of ocean temperatures, hurricanes strengthen in power and extreme rainfall intensifies. For years before Helene, North Carolina Republican lawmakers fought against climate change mitigation measures that would have helped the areas impacted by Helene. North Carolina's State General Assembly in 2006 convened a legislative commission on global climate change to study how climate change could impact the state. The final report of the commission in 2010 asked the state legislature to pass a climate adaptation strategy. This strategy would include conducting a statewide climate vulnerability assessment and, most importantly, an adaptation plan for more frequent and intense hurricanes and flooding. That bill was never signed into law due to opposition from Republican lawmakers. In 2020, after the state's climate risk assessment and resilience plan showed once again the many risks posed by climate change, Republican lawmakers continued to block climate legislation. In the days and weeks that followed after Helene's destruction in North Carolina, disinformation began to spread rapidly on the internet about the federal government not giving aid to certain affected areas. The disinformation especially ran rampant around FEMA's role in providing relief. Despite claims from the Republican Party, including Donald Trump, that the federal government withheld aid, this is false. President Biden and Vice President Harris both actively supported relief efforts. Biden approved a major disaster declaration for North Carolina, which allowed those affected access to funds and other resources to immediately start recovery. National Guard members also delivered supplies by helicopter to remote towns cut off by the hurricane. There was some difficulty in emergency response directly after Helene hit, but it was mainly due to destroyed roads and power outages. Although FEMA has been supporting those directly impacted by Helene, the hurricane did expose a huge gap in an area of the state that FEMA had not been covering. Since 1989, North Carolina has received $445 billion from FEMA for projects that build protection against natural disasters. Only 5% of the funding, though, has gone to those 25 counties in North Carolina that have been declared a disaster after Helene hit. This spotlights a huge gap in flood protection and natural disaster adaptation efforts in western North Carolina, due to these areas at the time being considered less susceptible to climate change impacts. FEMA continues to support those affected by Helene regardless, having provided more than $137 million in assistance to 6 states in the southeast affected as of October 6. What's next for the region when it comes to rebuilding all that was lost, and how long will it take? It's hard to say how long the state will need to fully recover from all the damaged infrastructure. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg estimated it would cost billions of dollars and potentially years to fully repair a damaged stretch of I-40 near the North Carolina-Tennessee border. Asheville's Biltmore Village, relying on tourism like the rest of the city, is estimated to take months to repair. Many North Carolina residents are still reeling from the destruction of Helene, and the threat of future and stronger hurricanes still remain. Mayor of Chimney Rock, Peter O'Leary, faced with this uncertainty, stated it's going to take a long time, but again, we're hopeful. And that's a wrap on Channel CYM Episode 1. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos from us soon. And from the whole Channel CYM team, thank you, and until next time.